Okay, Madam Chair, we are now live.
Good evening, everyone. I call this meeting to order. This is the Land Use Planning and Zoning Committee of the City Council. Councilor Borrego is excused from today's meeting. All committee members are present today via Zoom. This is a remote or online meeting where all participants will be on a video or audio conference. We are holding this meeting remotely so that everyone can participate safely while we are conducting business in this way. We appreciate your patience. Members of the public have the opportunity to address the committee if they have signed up for live public comment per the rules published on the agenda and on our website Friday. But I understand no one has signed up to address the committee today. Written comments were received for today's meeting and have been distributed to all committee members. Members of the public, city staff, and the media have the ability to view this meeting live through YouTube and Zoom webinar. The live stream can be accessed from most smartphones, tablets, or computers. For those watching on the live stream, thank you for joining us. We will now go to agenda item A, EC 406. EC 406 is the mayor's appointment of Mrs. Jana Lynn Pfeiffer to the Environmental Planning Commission. I move confirmation.
Madam Chair, does that require a second? If it does, I will offer a second.
Yes, it does. Thank you. And now we can move on. Councilors, are there any questions or comments? And then we will ask our candidate to speak if she would like. No questions or comments?
No, I do.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Councilor Gibson, please.
I was letting other people go first if they wanted to. So, we have, this council looks at many appointments and for all sorts of things. There are two boards that, in my experience on being on council are probably the toughest, one being the CPOA board and the other being this board, the EPC. And they're both really require an awful lot. And I respect and am grateful to all of the people who serve on each one of those. But on the EPC, that's such a technical board that I think we need to look at, as we have in the past for this board, people who come on who have professional experience or some educational experience on this. So I'll say that I was a little surprised to see Ms. Jana on this EC. And I guess I would like to ask her if, did you seek this out, ma'am, or did somebody tell you about it and you decided to seek it out? If I may ask her that, please, Madam Chair.
Yes, of course. Ms. Pfeiffer, would you like to answer that, please? Good evening.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Madam Chair Trudy
Still
Jones.
afternoon, isn't it? That doesn't seem possible. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Councilor Diane. I appreciate your question. Yes, I was actually reached out by Councilor Lansena for this position.
I see. So can you tell me what about this particular committee or board, I guess I should call it, that appeals to you and just how you feel about that work. I understand that somebody has told you some of the things that they look at and the tasks that they're charged with.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Councilor Diane. I appreciate your question. First of all, I would just like to introduce myself. Is that okay?
Mm-hmm.
Of course.
Great, thank you. My name is Jana Pfeiffer. I'm originally from Cajon Mesa, Utah, which is the northern part of the Navajo Nation. I'm a citizen of the Navajo Nation. I grew up in Farmington, New Mexico. From there, in 2008, I had moved here to the city of Albuquerque. It is through this process of living within the Four Corners area and raising a family in Farmington and seeking out education here at the University of New Mexico that I finally was able to plant my footprint here in the city of Albuquerque. So I'm really excited that I was able to kind of just research and go into the background with the Environmental Planning Commission and to seek more information about this commission as well. Through my experience working here in the city of Albuquerque, I've been able to work in the anti-violence capacity, mainly on the public safety side of our community members, our tribal nations, and as well as a community member myself. Through that experience, I've been able to interact with federal, state, and local agencies. And through that process, I truly believe that when it comes to the Environmental Planning Commission, a diverse voice and perspective is needed. And my understanding is that a couple months ago that we have seen a resolution where diverse voices, what our counselors are seeking out to, definitely represent our commission and our boards. And I truly believe as an Indigenous Native person, that is an important value to the multi-diverse city that we have here, and it should be a reflection within the commission board. And I think that through my experience as being a Indigenous Native person to this land, as being a steward of this land, recognizing that our Pueblo Nation are the main lands that we reside on. And it is through my journey of moving here, realizing the background and the history of the Pueblo Nations, and specifically for District 1, how we have the zoning and the public land use that's being used here. We are on Pueblo land, and we definitely border the Isleta, the Sandia, the Santa Ana, and so forth. And I think that that's something we have to take in consideration when it comes to an Indigenous voice and perspective and how they can represent the commission when it comes to District 1.
Thank you for that. And I neglected to start out, and I should have, but I'll say it now. Thank you for your interest and for volunteering for this position. Thank you. I absolutely mean that, because I really am grateful to everybody who does serve the city on these volunteer boards. And I recall that the passing of that legislation also to make sure that we try our very best to get representation on our boards and commissions and committees that do better represent people who have been underrepresented. I get it. I voted for that. I don't think anybody voted against it. But so let me just make my point. Instead, I don't like to beat around the bush. I think you're a very intelligent, very, very capable woman. And your perspective, your life perspective, as you describe it, really does lend itself towards advocacy for people who not only Native American people, but people who have not had voices at the table. Here's my hesitation. My hesitation is that this particular board is really, really technical. I would love to have you, working with the city in a capacity where you have some prior understanding and prior background. And I think that you'd be a really good advocate, particularly in a position like that, where you do have some knowledge and background, because I think that you could use your skills as a representative and as an advocate much more effectively than you may be able to on EPC. So that's my hesitation, but I'm really glad to hear about you and where you come from, and I'm glad you're here in Albuquerque. And I really I don't. This sounds like a criticism, and it really isn't. I don't mean it to be a criticism, and I don't feel critical of you at all. It's just that I do feel like you could be a much better advocate working in an area where you do have some experience or education or whatever. So that's really all I have to say, Madam Chair. Thank you very much for this chance to talk.
Councilor Gibson and Councilor Benton, you're next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Ms. Pfeiffer, for stepping up. Really appreciate it. As Councilor Gibson said, I was very interested in reading about your involvement with Bears Ears and the land use in that very loaded and unusual situation. And you were chosen to well, you can describe your role. I read what I saw in our packet, but interested in that specifically. And wow, that's the ultimate land use question, right? Of what do we preserve and what do we recognize of longstanding land rights, let's just call it that. But I was interested in your perspective on that.
Thank you, Councilor Benton, for that question. I appreciate it. First of all, I just want to note that I think that as an Indigenous woman from an Indigenous community, we tend to take all considerations, whether it is the individual leader, associates or consultants or state, federal, but as an Indigenous person, to be in that perspective where you're directly impacted, seeing how you're told your land has to be utilized is a very important perspective to note. That experience myself was really important, where I am the only second generation of an educated granddaughter. I was able to come forward and be able to articulate for my uncles and my grandparents and community members that don't have a professional education or background, and help them understand this process of what was taking place in our ancestral homeland in Bear Ears Monument. That's originally where my great-great-great-grandfather, Chief Ayeli, comes from. He was born at Bear Ears Monument. We were able to find refugee from the Long Walk when we stayed in the Bear Ears Monument. So it's a very deeply contentious, land dispute. But at the same time, I understand that the current era that we're in and the protections of sacred land, but also in addition to that, understanding that the tribal community that is adjacent to this Bear Ears Monument also have rights to understanding their ability to utilize the land, and whether that is gathering wood or herbs or ceremonial practices. That was something that compelled me to come forward and to be able to help my family understand that these things are still not impacting them. This monument is here, whether it's through the different federal administrations of going back and forth. And I think in terms of the leaders of our communities, they were able to voice that on a collective level. And sometimes I think we have this stereotype or stigma where we are, as Indigenous Native person, that we're radicalists in terms of when it comes to environmental protection and our rights. But I think we do understand that collaboration, consulting with federal and state agencies is something not familiar with our Indigenous communities. And I truly believe that tribal consultation is very important, done in a very professional manner, and the outcomes do not always have to be contentious, that we can find a very middle ground and really balance our way in this modern era when it comes to our tribal communities, but still have ties to our tribal lands, our sacred spaces, and really our inherent rights to some of these locations, maybe reservations that were outlined by the federal government. So I think that in terms of Indigenous perspective, I have a full life experience being a community member. At the same time, some of the challenges that have occurred for me is moving in the city, understanding that there's a different urbanized way of living as an Indigenous Native person. Where is that middle ground for myself when it comes to my children and raising my two children, how we identify ourselves in an urbanized setting, what is a safe place, our health and well-being. So I think in terms of what Councillor Diana was mentioning, the technical aspects of that, I believe that my experience has afforded me roles and responsibilities to advocate for many years. I've asked to speak, I've asked to represent, I've asked to come forward to participate on this commission board. And I truly believe that my years of experience has allowed me to understand what is put before me and to be able to carry those responsibilities and those roles out. I don't believe that what Councillor Diane was talking about, that the professional technical responsibilities will be a challenge, but I can say that I am willing to learn, I'm willing to come forward and to be able to discuss these things with my fellow commission board members as well. So I do understand your concerns on that, but I truly believe that I am the right person for this position.
Madam Chair, if I may continue.
Yes, Councilor Benton, and
Thank you.
Councilor Pena, I see your hand. I will get to you shortly. Thank you.
And Ms. Pfeiffer, I very much appreciate that. That is a compelling argument with regard to, again, I kind of gave you a little lead in of a fundamental question about the land and its use and who really owns it. I mean, there's a lot of, let's face it, there's a whole lot of deference given to what's called land rights in this country. And that has to do with whatever the land rights may be at any given time. But what's the legacy of those land rights? How did they come down? This really gives me a lot of reason to think about the role of the EPC. And yes, if you read these descriptions as were described, that were read by Councilor Gibson, that is what it says in the formative ordinance. But I think you offer us some very important food for thought about what the role of that body is. And it has been a body, and I've stood by this over the years, that just looks at the facts. As Joe Friday, the old TV detective, used to say, just the facts, ma'am. And then that's the way it operates, because it just looks at the rules on the books and what is our comprehensive plan? What are those goals that are laid out in our comprehensive plan? And I urge you to take a look at that. If you haven't already, I shouldn't assume that you haven't. I don't. But the comp plan, which is the fundamental policy document, and then our zoning code, which has been controversial, but it's called the Integrated Development Ordinance, and it's what's on the books. And a lot of what the EPC's role is to interpret and to ensure that it's followed. So, but yeah, where did these land rates descend from? And I believe is the Native American population of Albuquerque around 15% of the population. I believe that's my understanding. Do you know, anyone know that figure? Ms. Pfeiffer? I think it's in that vicinity. That's a pretty important part of our community that needs to be heard from. And I like the also your statement about kind of the legacy of Native women being problem solvers and people who bring people together and look at all sides. Very much appreciate that. But I'll yield, Madam Chair. I might want to say something more before we're done, but again, thank you, Ms. Pfeiffer, for stepping up.
Thank you, Councilor Benton. Councilor Pena, you have your hand raised.
My battery on my mouse must be dying. So thank you, Madam Chair. Welcome, Ms. Pfeiffer. I'm sorry I got on a little late, but I'm just hearing the conversation. I'm encouraged to see someone of color, especially a Native American, wanting to serve on the Environmental Planning Commission. As you know, it's such an important board in our community. Actually, I think some of the strength that came with the EPC has dwindled a little bit because we have most of the stuff going to the DRB, but it's still an important board that we have in the city of Albuquerque. I reside on the west side. I've always partnered with former Councilor Ken Sanchez, and then obviously Councilor Sena. And as you know, that's really the area of the city where we're growing, and it abuts native land. And so I think your perspective in bringing, as our city grows, bringing a balance between growth and what the Native American community has to offer is an important part of how we grow more unified and holistically, right? My grandmother is from Isleta, so I don't know what percentage I am, but I'm in the row somewhere. But I wanted to ask, and I don't know who from the staff is here, and there's some conversation about experience, and we have Miss Shanna Schultz. And if you could talk to me about what are the requirements of sitting on EPC, because I really believe that it's my understanding that this is a board of community members, obviously encouraged to have some kind of expertise in the field, but that it's not required as a requirement to sit on this board. I'm a former EPC planning commissioner. I know there's one or two commissioners now that don't have direct experience. So I just kind of wanted to dispel that a little bit, because I think this young lady has lots to offer, and we could learn from as a city. So Ms. Schultz, can you please explain the requirements?
Madam Chair, Councilor Pena, sure, I'd be happy to do that. The qualifications for the Environmental Planning Commission are set forth in the Integrated Development Ordinance. In the section of the IDO where it talks about the roles and responsibilities of the board, it also talks about the qualifications for the board. And I will just go ahead and read directly the sentence from that document. The EPC membership includes one resident per city council district with experience in community planning, architecture, landscape architecture, urban design, real estate development, transportation, civil engineering, and/or real estate finance. So candidates are expected to kind of fall into one of those buckets as outlined in the document.
So it's not, so if you have some experience in that, it doesn't require that you have any kind of degree in any of those fields, right?
Madam Chair, Councilor Pena, there are no education requirements. It's all kind of broadly talked about as just experience.
Perfect. Thank you, Ms. Schultz. So thank you, Madam Chair. I just think this
I'm sorry,
the
we've lost,
Environmental Planning Commission's thing.
I'm sorry, we've lost you. Councilor Pena, would you say that last sentence again, please?
I was just saying, thank you, Madam Chair. I think that Ms. Pfeiffer would be an excellent addition to the Environmental Planning Commission. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilors, any other comments? If not, I would like to say a few things. Jan, thank you so much for being willing to do this. This is one of the most important committees that serves with the council and with our city. I'm sure you have seen that the major role of this is to interpret and deal with the documents that we have in place for development and how things are done. Unfortunately, it is not, it is very technical. It is very technical, and many people have been on it without those technical skills. But tell me, please, give me a little bit about your background. What have your education, which is not essential, incidentally, your employment, what jobs you've done, and what you've enjoyed, and what you think your role would be on the EPC. Knowing, of course, sorry to interrupt before I let you talk, knowing, of course, that there are 8 other members of this planning commission.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair Trudy Jones. I appreciate your question. I think that in terms of my education, obtaining the bachelor's degree that I have at the University of New Mexico, which was in Native American Studies and a minor in Women's Studies, I truly believe that we are in an era where, as Indigenous people, we're recognizing our inherent sovereignty when it comes to our tribal nations, our people, and our land, and what we've contributed to here in the state of New Mexico. So it was important for me to choose a degree that allowed me to further understand the complexities of our history when it comes to the assimilation era, maybe the land allotment that took place, the checkerboard regions when it comes to Native lands. In addition to that, understanding the social justice movements that are occurring within the environmental impacts, whether it's oil and gas. Some of the other impacts I can think of is even just the government, the Navajo Nation government, and our Pueblo governments, and the way that they are structured and modeled. It really kind of dives into the intersections of where our tribal nations are during this time. I truly believe that there is a movement when it comes to our youth on these topics. They are definitely becoming more aware, and that's something that I continue to teach as a mother. What I learn, I also teach my children. It's important for me to provide that perspective that we have come a long ways when it comes to, being alive today in current modern times. So that Native studies was important. The women's studies was also important in terms of understanding my work in the anti-violence capacity, and seeing, growing up as a child, many of the domestic violence and sexual assault cases that occurred, whether if it was in my family or whether it was in my community or a friend that may have experienced, that deeply impacted me in many ways. Seeing childhood trauma and being able to say that I have solutions to bring forward to our tribal communities. And that's another theme that I'm recognizing is the public safety of our people. That's something that I truly advocate in the well-being of our tribal communities, and in addition to here within the city urban lifestyle. When it comes to my employment, throughout the years, I've been able to work at a non-governmental agency and be able to oversee many of the key stakeholders that were assisting the Coalition to Stop Violence Against Native Women. I have some experience when it comes to facilitation, working with key stakeholders when it comes to the outcomes of some of our grant objectives, and working with some of the governors and counselors within the tribal communities as well, on their decisions on how to make their tribal communities more safe. And again, another theme that is important to me, public safety. And through that experience, I moved into direct services when it comes to working with the most vulnerable people here in the city of Albuquerque. It was a grant that I oversaw with the Department of Justice. That grant in itself allowed me to work one-on-one with individuals who were being trafficked here in the city of Albuquerque. Through that experience, I was able to see the clinic and its role and responsibility to our most vulnerable population here in the city, and also mapping and understanding certain spaces within the city that were particularly not safe for women and children, to mention bus stops, locations along the I-40 and I-25, and give a general overview of how our city of Albuquerque, certain spaces are really not safe for our community members. And that's been something that I've always constantly spoke about. Some of the presentations that I've worked with, whether it was on behalf of this grant or working at the National Criminal Justice Training Center, speaking about the geographic nature of the city of Albuquerque and the state of New Mexico as well. For the New Mexico Attorney General's office, I think that role in itself was really important in understanding that at a state level, we have a responsibility when it comes to working with our most vulnerable, and then understanding that having an Indigenous person within the state agency, public service again, was important for my role being at the New Mexico State Attorney General's office. Through that experience, I've been able to work with a lot of the federal FBI agents, Homeland Security as well, and then also overlooking the New Mexico State Human Trafficking Task Force. Through that,
Jana, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I think we need to move on with this. Your job experience is fantastic and very impressive. But what we're talking about here is a committee that interprets the laws that have, as far as development and the way things are built within the city of Albuquerque. And it is an interpretation of the laws that are on the books. So just to make it a little clearer where we're going, and I appreciate what you've done, very impressive young lady. So thank you for being willing to serve on this. Councillor Gibson hasn't, Councillor Pena, did you have another question? Okay. Councillor Gibson has, would you like to say something?
Yes, thank you. So the more you talk, the more I like you, but I want you to be successful. And you just mentioned 3 or 4 things that I thought, wow, you could make a really incredible contribution on things like public safety or something a little bit closer to home like domestic violence. So that's, and other things too. It's hard for me to find the right words without sounding critical of you. And I really don't want to sound critical of you, but I would like to put somebody on the EPC who has had the, for example, the upbringing that you've had, that has known a different culture than what, for example, what as a white woman, what I knew, I would like to bring somebody like that onto EPC who is a planner or an architect or an engineer or somebody who knows something about zoning and land use. So I guess that sounds critical, and I apologize for it because I do not want to be critical of you. I think you're a wonderful person, and could really make an incredible difference to our city. And I do mean that. Thank you. So that's all I have.
Thank you, Councilor Gibson. Councilor Benton. Councilor Benton, your sound is off.
I'm sorry, there I go again. I'd like to make a motion to send this appointment to the full council. And my druthers would be to send it with a full recommendation, but I think some questions have been raised. And so I'm moving to send it with that recommendation so that the full council can consider the appointment of Ms. Pfeiffer. Because I think this is a fascinating discussion from my perspective as to the importance of not only land rights, but land use and how it affects all sorts of folks who live in our city. And there are these technical questions that have been raised, and they're legitimate technical questions, Ms. Pfeiffer. I'm confident that these aren't questions about whether you are fit to serve or anything of that sort, but rather some technical questions about a technical committee. Let's put it that way. So I would like to move it to the full council without recommendation. If there's a second for that.
I'll second that.
There's a motion and a second to move to full council without recommendation. Are there any comments on that?
Madam
Unfortunately,
Chair, I see Councillor Sena's on. Maybe she'd like an opportunity to speak.
Councillor Sena, would you like to make a statement on this?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Councillor Pena. I do appreciate, I know I'm not part of LUPS, and appreciate just being able to jump on to speak on behalf of my appointment. Ms. Pfeiffer, the reason why, and many folks have asked me, why did I hold out for so long? And for me, it's really finding the right person like Ms. Pfeiffer. I think the conversation today is important, but also noting that we as a city council have voted in support and have the commitment to really put forward diverse voices on boards that we believe need that diverse voice. And for me, it was really seeking out someone like Ms. Pfeiffer to really serve on this board as we see and shape our community when it comes to environmental planning and our own land use. And I believe that her experience, especially with something as complicated and what we see with even Bears Ears, that federal, local, municipal, you name it, has been intertwined with her work. And I believe that she has the skill and the technicality that would serve EPC and even our city very well. So I'm very grateful for her having accepted really me requesting her to sit on this board, and the importance of actually having Indigenous voices shape how we use our land. And I think what was said today, and really what Ms. Pfeiffer is really aiming for, and how she serves our community and how we can give back to her as well. I think for us being on Tiwa land, it's important to recognize that really in some ways where we should be renting this land and giving back to community. And for me, having someone with the experience like Ms. Pfeiffer to serve on this commission is really critical and essential, and something we have never had. And in fact, if she does receive this appointment, she'll be the first woman and first Indigenous voice to actually be at this table. And so thank you again for entertaining me coming to this committee and actually speaking on behalf of my appointment.
Thank you, Councilor Sena. Any other questions? Any other comments? I guess I'm going to get to say one more comment before we call Councilor Pena.
I had my hand up.
Oh,
So
I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand. I was looking at your face and you didn't nod at me. Counselor Pena.
thank you, Madam Chair. I was just going to ask the staff if they could get me the full list of the EPC commissioners and with their experience and their resumes before the next meeting.
Madam Chair, Counselor Pena, I'd be happy to compile that for you. I will get that to you as soon as possible.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Counselor Pena. Counselor Benton.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. And also just for staff, Councilor Pena's question makes me think of what has been the history of in recent years of folks. And I know Councilor Pena served on the EPC as a community activist, as far as I know. I'm sure she's been involved in all sorts of development in her career outside of that as well. But this really raises such important questions about the policy and of course, as was stated by Councilor Pena, the fact that the mandate of the EPC has changed somewhat. And does this change that at all? The intertwining with the comprehensive plan, which I mentioned to Ms. Pfeiffer, is something that I think is a wonderful document, by the way. That how we, it's true that the DRB was given more technical authority under the new zoning code, which may or may not be a good idea, but they were always a technical board. I hope and I think we ought to ensure that they're still a technical board and that the EPC is a board that is more looking at the bigger picture and the nuances of urban life for everyone in an inclusive manner. So I think we're kind of stuck behind this somewhat of an 8-ball here with what the supposed qualifications are for the board. And I'd like some staff analysis of that as well, along with what Councilor Pena asked for.
Madam Chair, Counselor Benton, I'd be happy to provide that as well to you.
Okay, any other comments, counselors? Counselor Gibson.
I have a question, and maybe Counselor Sena can answer this. Maybe Ms. Schultz can answer this. Do we believe that we could not find another person who is as much of an advocate and also has a perspective, a life experience of being non-white, non-Anglo, maybe from from a reservation or other place that has not been represented well in city? Do we think that we cannot find someone like that who does have technical experience? Is anybody?
Madam Chair, Counselor Gibson, it's typically been the role of the counselor for that district to kind of seek out candidates or to at least put the word out there that they're seeking candidates for their district seat. And I would maybe defer that question to Counselor Sena to comment on how the journey has gone so far on looking for candidates.
Counselor Sena.
Well, Counselor Gibson, I think for me, what was most critical, and especially for District 1, having so many spaces, and like I said, we are still on Tiwa land, but specifically for District 1, the complexities of whether it's the petroglyphs, whether it's sacred spaces that really is sacred to our Indigenous communities, why it was so important to have Ms. Pfeiffer, and like Ms. Pfeiffer even stated, that I sought out her to serve on this board. That does not mean that we did not come across others who sought to sit on this board as well. But for me, specifically for the needs of District 1 and the complexities of why we've never had this representation to sit on this board, whether intentional or not. I think that it's most important to actually have a voice like Ms. Pfeiffer there. It's not to say that no one else has tried to seek this position. Of course, many have. But for me, it's really myself going out into community, which is something that City Council has really, I think, strived for. You know, City Council voted to really make sure that we have these diverse voices to sit on these boards and commissions that's reflective of our community. And for me, it was Ms. Pfeiffer. I am still wholeheartedly in belief that she can serve this position and serve it well. And regardless of the technicalities of it, I think that it's most important that actually having her voice at this table, regardless of, you know, if someone else is out there, I'm sure there are. However, for me, it was actively seeking and going into community and asking for these recommendations. And her name wholeheartedly multiple times has come forward. And so for me, it's really thinking through of why it's important to have her serve. And it's my commitment still to have her serve.
Thank you, Councilor Senna. Are there any other questions? I'm going to try to make sure that we have this correct then before we close. Councilor Penny, you have another question? Councilor
Yeah. Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, so I just wanted to make sure also if staff can get the makeup of the board for us as well. I mean, I don't know if Councilor or any other councilors, but for me at least. And then I just wanted to kind of reiterate a little bit of what I had stated, and then what Councilor Benton stated is about that really the technical expertise has really been deferred to the DRB. That because that actually puts a lot of ability, I guess, for lack of a better word, in terms of our city staff, you know. And I think when EPC was able to do this, and it had a makeup of community members and people who had experience as described earlier, it really made for a really good balance. And I think it gave at least perspective. I know oftentimes my vote died on lots of issues just because, you know, maybe I didn't see, but at least I had an opportunity to have my voice heard at forum. And so when we're talking about our, you know, our being equitable in the city of Albuquerque too, you know, I think that if we have a board or a commission as important as being described here today, and that we have barriers to participation, I have concern with that. So, you know, we may need to revisit some of the requirements and part of people's ability to be able to sit on this board, especially because this is about land use and development. And when you have folks who are, you know, sometimes often, you know, people of color who don't really necessarily have a seat at the table. And then we have processes in place that limit have access. It just kind of concerns me. So I just wanted to have that on the record. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Pena. Are there any other comments? Or I'm going to try to confirm here that the motion on the floor is what, Ms. Schultz? Or
Yeah, Madam Chair, the current motion on the floor as proposed by Councilor Benton was a motion of no recommendation to the full council.
Councilor Benton, are you comfortable with that?
I am, and just again to make clear, reflects in no way on my opinion of the candidate. However, I think this has been a fairly nuanced discussion that deserves hearing by the full council without this committee making any statement one way or the other about it. That's my intent.
Thank you. Councilors, any other comments? So the motion on the floor is no recommendation. And there was a second on that. So Ms. Montoya, will you take a roll on that, please?
Absolutely. Councilor Benton,
Yes.
Councilor Gibson,
Regrettably, no.
Councilor Pena,
Mine would have been to support just the appointment, but I guess if this is necessary, yes.
Counselor Jones.
No.
That motion fails on a 2-2 vote.
And the result of that is,
Madam Chair, that vote fails, and so there will need to be another motion made to deal with the agenda item, whether that's a deferral or a motion other than no recommendation.
Counselor Benton.
I'll move a recommendation of acceptance of the appointment confirmation to the full council.
Thank you. And
Second.
there's a motion and a second for no recommendation, but move to the full council.
Madam Chair, I believe the motion was to confirm the appointment as distinct from the no recommendation motion that just failed.
Thank you, Ms. Schultz. Okay, so there is a do approve motion on the floor with a second. Ms. Montoya, will you call the roll, please?
Counselor Benton.
Yes.
Counselor Gibson.
No.
Counselor Pena.
Yes.
Counselor Jones.
No.
That motion fails on a 2-2 vote.
Counselor Benton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move deferral until the next LUPS meeting. I guess this is our only choice at this point.
Thank you, Counselor. Is there a second on that?
Madam President, Madam Chair, when is our next LUPS meeting?
About a month?
Madam Chair, Councilor Pena, the next regularly scheduled LUPS hearing is on December 15th.
Okay, thank you.
There is a motion and a second for deferral. Any other comments?
Was there a second?
Counselor Pena, second.
Oh, thank you.
Any comments? Ms. Montoya.
Counselor Benton.
Yes.
Counselor Gibson.
Yes.
Counselor Pena.
Yes.
Counselor Jones.
Yes.
That passes on a 4-0 vote.
Thank you, counselors, and thank you, ma'am, for being here. And we'll go on to the next step. Is there any other business? Seeing none. Any counselors, any questions or comments? Seeing none, this meeting is adjourned. Good night.